souffle pancakes. That sounds so yum.
This Week in E-Commerce, episode 131, recording live from Japan. Not Oscar, Alex. Oscar's my son. I'm just yelling at him. How are you, Alex?
I'm good. Enjoying kind of the calm over here versus where you're at with the family traveling. It sounds like there's a lot going on.
Look, I tried to like cut down on quite a number of calls, so I have. I've tried to do everything in the morning. But what struck me about Japan is that nothing is open early. So my plan of going to be able to find a cafe for a couple of hours where the kids are still asleep, do some work, has not panned out because there is nowhere open. So right now, as you can see in my background, I am sitting in the stairwell outside my apartment because it's the quietest place to work from.
It's a good looking stairwell at least. The architecture is always on point. What when I was in Japan, what blew my mind was, the shops and cafes don't open till 10, 11 in the morning. But then particularly for the retail shops, I don't know if you've seen this, but there are lines to get into every store in the morning. Everybody's like waiting, geared up for the shops to open.
Yeah, I think definitely some stores. I think it's especially in Osaka where we are. There's a lot of tourists around here, and so they know where to hit. Yeah. They've kind of got their list. So before they open, they're there, ready to go in, do their thing. Particularly when it comes to food as well. There's like a souffle pancake place around the corner, and there was a line about 20 deep yesterday morning.
Yum, souffle pancakes. That sounds so yum.
Yeah, I think we're going to check them out today. All right, speaking of pancakes, we're going to dive straight into it because we have Easter coming up this weekend, which has really snuck up on a lot of people, seeing a lot of people not being overly prepared for Easter. But one area which has been completely prepared for this is obviously the confectionery market, where in particular, shrinkflation has struck again, absolutely no surprises, where this year, Cadbury's large hollow egg packs have declined from 408 grams to 340 grams. And that same product has gone from $12.50 to $18 over the last 2 years. Now, that's incredible.
No, and look, I think we've all probably noticed walking around the supermarkets, it is visible that the chocolate, it just seems really expensive. It's not like we're at Hague's or looking at these premium products. This is kind of just run of the mill, as good as it is, Cadbury from Woolworths or Coles, to see those prices and to the point, seeing the product itself shrink, it just seems like a sign of the times, doesn't it?
Yeah, and look, for the last couple of years, there has been an increase in cocoa prices, but in the last 12 months, cocoa prices have actually decreased as well. So they can't use that as an excuse. I think that these companies are just looking for any excuse to increase their prices, particularly if they're getting squeezed in the margins as well through Woolworths and Coles, and looking at ways to just, continue maintaining their profit. Good for them, but unfortunately bad for the consumer yet again. All right, our next quick for today is that the ACCC, this is a story we actually talked about a few months ago, have now fined Photo Bookshop $39,600 in penalties for 2 ACCC infringement notices due to 107 influencer reviews which they commissioned but did not disclose between August 2024 and August 2025.
Yeah, it's I don't know if that penalty surprises me or not. 7 reviews sounds like a lot to me, particularly as you'd imagine they're top-rated reviews as well. I think it's just another one of those warnings where hopefully brands really understand or retailers understand the guidelines here, and ACCC is on top of it as always.
Yes and no, because I think the fine is actually kind of small as well. When you look at it at a per review basis, it's about $307 per review, which is not very much. I mean, considering that they're paying the reviewer probably about $400 to maybe up to $1,000 for each one of these at the most, right? So it's so small in comparison that I don't think it's actually going to make a dent. That I think they'll probably continue doing it. Other brands, it's not enough to really scare them off doing this in the future. That it almost becomes a cost of doing business. I think if you really want to stop this, you need to make the fine significant.
Yeah, okay. Yep. No, that's an interesting take. And I think, look, if anything, hopefully on top of the monetary penalty, right, is just that erosion in trust from consumers and shoppers just having less trust in what those reviews are organic or paid for any business, really. It kind of hurts all of retail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Australian Consumer Laws Board has actually signalled that you do require to disclose anything where it's gifted or paid, and not enough brands are doing this. I know there's many brands who I work with where it's really like pulling hen's teeth to get them to actually make sure that these disclosures are part of the influencer contract, but they are happening, and I hope to see that there is more enforcement of this, so that there is more transparency for consumers when they're looking at an influencer reviewing the product.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the next quickie is one which we all saw coming, which is Australia Post have increased the fuel surcharge for all parcels being delivered. No surprises. So across 30,000 contracted customers from the 23rd of April, there has been a surcharge increase for fuel from 4.8% to 12%. Star Trek Express have increased theirs from 15.5 to 22.7. And obviously, this is a direct result of all that's happening in the Middle East at the moment, as more and more businesses look to actually increase the fuel charges, which obviously increases the cost for retailers as well.
Look, to your point, it's something that we obviously all saw coming, but it's a big jump, right? It's a big hit for brands to take.
Yeah, and this comes straight off the bottom line where you're already suffering from the fact that there's lower consumer confidence, interest rate rises. So with all that in play, as well as this additional hit on your margin, God, it's a bitter pill to take.
Yeah, look, I think talking with some brands around this and just the general impact at the moment with fuel costs, that conversation around kind of raising those free shipping thresholds, but then really understanding what your average order value is, and then also what your average items per transactions are, and how can you kind of offset this a bit, but it still makes sense for the shopper so that free shipping threshold isn't totally out of reach. This is a fine balance for the businesses there.
Yep, absolutely. And also, if they're trying to get there by also reducing prices as well, or introducing discounts to help them get to that free shipping threshold, it just creates more of a double whammy. So there's never been a more important time to make sure that you are aware of your contribution margin, because this is just takes a direct hit to your contribution margin. So understanding what your proper unit economics are so that you can actually factor this in. And our final quickie for today is just following up on one we talked about last week, which is KMD Brands have now come on and voluntarily suspended their ASX trading while they are in the negotiations for recapitalisation. So as a result, their their half year 26 results are going to be delayed, and this is due to a voluntary suspension while they seek further information.
Yeah, I think this one was interesting to read through off the back of us covering the news last week around the US business looking to kind of restructure and take Rip Curl from KMD Brands. What's your take on this latest update, Mel?
Oh, I think there's something going on behind the scenes which the market isn't quite seeing just yet, and it will eventually come out. Obviously, being a publicly listed company, but there does seem to be some troubles there. KMD has been in trouble for a little while, particularly Kathmandu, which has not been performing overly well. And obviously, there was the attempt to be able to acquire Rip Curl, we've heard about over the last couple of weeks as well. So, look, my take is that like all of retail is just generally struggling as a whole. So this is probably going to have some long-term impacts if it does come out that things have not been, that they have been unable to renegotiate their finances, inject new capital into the business. So we'll see what happens there. But it would be an absolute shame for KMD to go under, given their portfolio of fairly iconic brands, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. They're great brands. I think we're all kind of rooting for them. So let's see how this kind of folds out or unfolds rather.
All right. And our first deep dive is Gap, the American icon, coming back to Australia for the third time. And I've never quite understood why Gap haven't really worked here, because I've remembered the first couple of times where they tried to enter the market. First time was in 2010. They closed those stores in 2018, and then in 2022 they tried to come back only through ecom only with True Alliance. But now they're coming back through Maya of all places. So looking to be stocked across all 27 Maya stores nationally, as well as the maya.com.au website as well, with a full standalone Australian ecom website launching in August 2026. So Maya looking to be taking a pretty big bet on Gap. Why do you think they'd be doing this around now?
Yeah, I think, look, on a side note to this story, we've been talking about Maya so much. They're making some massive plays, right? So I'm excited by that. I think that Gap has this feeling of nostalgia, if you will, which we know is a bit of a trend at the moment. So it does feel aligned with that. And I suppose off the back of them them being Maya announcing the addition of Topshop as well. They seem pretty close. So hopefully third time lucky for Gap in the market. We'll have to see.
Look, and I agree. I think, in terms of their cultural relevance, Gap have actually really started to make quite a big resurgence in the last couple of years. They've now had 6 consecutive quarters of growth, which is quite substantial in this market. They're also starting to gain a lot of cultural traction as well with creators like Troye Sivan, amongst many others as well. Like you said before, with Maya kind of tapping into this nostalgia, going, obviously bringing back Topshop a couple of months ago, Sportscraft, Nobody Denim, and a few other brands as well. This kind of makes sense in that strategy of trying to tap into these cultural icons. With Maya itself being a bit of a nostalgia, a legacy retail brand in Australia, to win back those customers who perhaps were shopping with them like 10, 20 years ago, who now have money, and now bringing them back with some of these legacy brands, it does make a lot of sense to tap into that market who now can actually afford to be spending with them.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a look at some of the product online on Maya's site from Gap. It was pretty cool. Like, I definitely want to do some shopping. I'm excited.
Look, I think Gap, like I said, it's a really iconic brand. They're everywhere in America. Even with some troubles they've had over the years, they brought aboard a new creative director a couple of years ago who brought some life back into the brand. So I think for Maya, this actually could turn out to be quite a good move. I guess the only thing for me, which I'm thinking of right now, is does the fact that it is a classic American brand and perhaps a bit of sense of anti-Americanism now with everything which is going on. How's that going to affect things there as well?
Yeah, no, look, that's valid. And whilst, Maya, correct me if I'm wrong, Australian business, right? Through and through. So we're supporting Maya in that sense. But yeah, there is that focus on Australian businesses and brands and keeping the dollar in the country.
Yeah, for definitely a lot of brands who are looking to launch as well, or expand across Australia, Maya is becoming a very viable channel for them, either through their wholesale or through their marketplace model as well on the website. So I think Maya, like you said at the top of this segment, are really making some big waves at the moment. Okay, and our final deep dive is going to be at big tech's very, very bad week. In particular, the verdict in New Mexico, where Meta have been fined $375 million for endangering children and misleading the public. YouTube also been fined $6 million as well in California for doing the same. And also our e-safety commissioner investigating Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube for non-compliance with the under 16 social media ban. So a lot seems to be happening in this space at the moment, with a lot of the tech companies really starting to feel the pinch. Obviously, from a dollars perspective, it is a tiny drop in the ocean, but it does speak to the fact that that there is again a lot of noise and it seems a lot of momentum both in Australia and the EU, but also now America as well, with people wanting to really rein in some of the power and control which a lot of these social media platforms have. What do you think this kind of means for retailers and what the opportunity is and what they should be looking for?
Yeah, look, I think that it just speaks to for retailers at the moment, understanding the channels that your shoppers are on, right? And part of that is truly understanding who your shoppers are as well on that demographic. Obviously, with that younger demographic having the bans at the moment, it just kind of has to open up a different channel mix. But all of this news, I think, is interesting just to see these platforms being hit from every angle across the world as well.
And I think this, hopefully from a retailer point of view, it does mean that, like you said, we do need to look at diversifying as well. Whereas before, you could pretty much put all your media dollars into Meta, Google, TikTok, Pinterest, and expect everything to be fine there. The fact that you're now losing a large chunk of the audience, that under 16 audience in a lot of countries as well, means that you need to diversify. You need to look at where else can you actually be reaching some of these people as well. So that could be back in in-person events, going around Japan. In-store is absolutely massive here. I'm sure online retail is huge as well, but in-store is huge. Every single mall, every single department store is absolutely jam-packed, like you said. So looking at how do you actually think about reaching these audiences? How do you build up your own list through email, SMS? How do you create own content as well, which a lot of brands are investing in at the moment as well, to create their own worlds where people can opt into, throughout any ages, right? So I think this is a real opportunity to think about how are you actually going to market to reach younger audiences if you can no longer reach them through the big tech companies. And the other thing
Yeah.
underpinning this
Yeah.
as well is ChatGPT now launching their ads as well and announcing last week that they're going to be rolling out their ads into Australia too.
Yeah, look, I think there's always an update on the ChatGPT pieces in there that we cover every week. I think the last is that they've said ads are coming to Australia. We don't know when. I tried to do some research through ChatGPT as well and still didn't get a clear answer. Same with the shopping piece. So we do know it's a matter of kind of when, not if. So one to watch, I think.
Look, I think ChatGPT have come out and said that they're not going to be using any of your individual chat data. It won't be shared. There will be no retargeting, and it'll be matched purely on topics or not. I hope that's the case. I also don't trust Sam Altman as far as I can throw him. So we'll see what happens there as well when they release this. Because I have no doubt that once the commercial realities of it come into play, that they're going to allow you to be able to target people based doing retargeting on these platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it seems when you release ads for free platforms, which is their approach here, so depending on your kind of subscription layer, you won't get those ads. Whether that's viable or we're just going to start seeing it creep into all different kind of subscriptions within the platform as well.
Classic enshittification.
Yeah.
For this week, a very quick one while I'm traveling and sitting in the freezing cold in Japan. In the meantime, have a great week, everyone. Have a fantastic Easter break. Keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling, and we'll see you back next week.